LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all of observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today.
Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. Quick announcement from thank you, Michael, for the reminder, our wonderful sponsor, IT Pro TV. They're introducing a new membership level on February 1st. All current premium members as of February 1st will be granted the highest membership level even available. Sign up today, itpro.tv/startup security, and use the code SS30 and save 30% off for life. Let's jump right into it, Michael. Let's do some listener feedback first. Oh, Michael, you're still on mute.
Right around the holidays there. So Joe wrote in, and actually we had mentioned Joe before, so he thanked us for that. And he said, all right, I got a question for you guys. Are you guys interested in doing a show that covers lifestyle businesses and how they contrast from startups? And then he continued, I think there could be a lot of people in the security industry, myself included, that aren't after the high risk and intensity of rapid growth, but do want to take on some level of business to give themselves some autonomy from their day job. There's also some legal aspects around work for hire restrictions and taxes. It'd be great if you guys could cover that. I'll answer first. Yes, Joe, totally interested in that. In fact, that's one of the things that we've been talking about is looking at the startup mindset, right? So if you go back to what I said at the top of the show, at least for me, and now it's funny, now that we've talked to Justin, I got to think this through a little bit, but if we talk about some of the beliefs of this program and some of the guidance, it was we want to talk about the business of security, but also how to better improve security in business, and what better way than looking at it through the lens of a startup. So one of the things we talked about on the last show was, startup founders aren't all 20 years old trying to get $1 million, billion-dollar unicorn valuations. So yes, we will absolutely do a segment or a show or something on that at some point. The other part to this, too, is we just identified in our kickoff production call this week, we are going to look. So we brought in Justin, look at some branding stuff. We're going to bring in some people to look at other aspects, accounting, legal, other considerations, and just kind of give us some flavor on that. We will have some VCs come in this year and work with us and talk to us. We're going to talk to some people in accelerators, and we'll talk to some people who run lifestyle businesses. Now, if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, what's a lifestyle business? That's when somebody it's typically they run a business. It might be solo, could be small team, but the idea is I make enough money to live. Oh, and I want to travel. I don't want to work on Fridays. I want to do whatever. And so the idea isn't that I'm building a big brand and a big company that survives all of eternity. It's much more of I want to control my own destiny. And it absolutely fits with what we're doing, especially if you want to try to test it out while you're still in your day job. We got you covered. Just stick with us.
I think it's a really important point that Joe brings up, and I think it's a path that a lot of people follow. And look, don't get me wrong. There are many people who are like, you know what? I'm just going to go do a startup. Like, that's my thing. I want the accelerated growth. I want to take all the risk, and I want to go do a startup. Some people fail. Some people are successful. Some people do it multiple times with a mixture of success and failure. And don't get me wrong, that's fun. There's something attractive to that. I applaud those people, success or failure, like you rock, like for taking on that much risk. I think with a side business, lifestyle business, if you're starting out that way, that's a great way to learn business. It's a great way to test the waters, like you said, Michael. Maybe you do that first, and then maybe you decide that you want to accelerate the growth of your existing business. You want to expand. You want to diversify. You want to maybe create another business that's your startup business. That was kind of how John and I actually got started in our journeys, right? I mean, we had our own businesses and then said, we want to do the startup thing. I think a product company tends to lend itself more towards startup because you need funding and
yeah,
and
I think that's very true. Yep, absolutely.
And I think the consulting style businesses kind of lend itself towards you're a solo person running a small team. But it could be, look, that's how John and I got started, right? We're a solo person. We started independent consulting, and then we worked on our path and different paths. I mean, for me, my consulting business, we just basically merged it with John's so that I could change gears and go off and do different things. So I think it's all valid advice for people that, there's, I guess my point is there's never one path when we're talking about this in the context of the show, right? There's lots of different paths for different people. So.
Yeah, and listening to you, I mean, man, the neurons were just firing off there. I think we got opportunities to talk about different business models because there's product, there's productized service, there's service, there's hybrid. There's also now this whole concept of infopreneur and taking your expertise and running that. There's high touch, there's low touch, there's transactional, there's value based. Oh my goodness. So yes. So Joe, I am so glad that you write in. And what I want to try to make clear in this program is we're going to grow and evolve, and we are excited about this. As kind of a quick preview. In fact, I'm going to be at a conference. It'll be here in Myrtle Beach in February. And we're going to be talking both about Straight Talk, but then I'm going to give a talk about innovation and security and the need for minimum viable security. So you're going to watch these things pop up, and we love it. At least I can speak for both of us. We love it, and this is good. So yes, we will stick with us. We're going to figure out some formats and some ways to do it, and it'll be a blast.
Absolutely. So what do we got for startup news?
The predictions thing, I felt like we needed to put it in just because, as you kind of pointed out, it wouldn't be the first of the year if we didn't do this. What I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm rescanning this one because I started to line some of these up before, but what I thought was interesting was I've read a couple that were like, here, I'm going to make my predictions, and I'm always wrong, but here I go, I'm going to make them anyway. I think what stuck out about this one was the first one. It's incredible time to be a technology entrepreneur. Yep, I love that. I love that concept. I love that idea. Like, I don't like these predictions that are dire. It's another year of getting screwed over. It's another year of this not happening. No, I think it's great. And they talked about that in this. They talked about a rising new guard that are now the most most valuable companies in the world. Apple, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Here's the funny thing about it. My son and I were driving in the car last night, and we went to an open house looking at STEM technologies and all sorts of other stuff. And he actually was talking to me. This is, I swear to you, it's almost as if he had read this. He was saying, that's really interesting, right? Because you've got Apple and you've got Google, but you've still got Microsoft. But, Amazon, and he very detailed analysis of Amazon and how they're moving into the space. And it was really neat to hear it from he's a teenager now, to hear it from a teenager's perspective of how some of these things work. And he's like, well, there's still Facebook. Like, he went through the whole list here. And nice. It's interesting because they are the new guard, and he's our future. And so it was interesting to kind of see that. But I think it's interesting. We'll keep covering them as we can. They talked about discipline, the M&A activity, everything else. Look, we're going to start trying to bring more of that into it. I think we're going to see more this year. We're going to see more focused on security, and I think that it's a good year, and that's why I want to really start legitimizing the security conversation in startups. You and I have talked about this for years, and we've talked about it with guests, and we've talked about it on the different shows. How do we help people understand security? How do we make it more accessible? That's one of my goals for this year. So that's my prediction. We're going to be successful at it.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add to that. I think it is an exciting time. I think it always is in technology, right? I think as technology progresses, its impact on business is always interesting. What I love about doing business today is how expanded all the markets are and how many options you have to reach people, to find new and creative solutions. I think that's awesome. I think it's always been the case over time, right? We're just in a really cool time where everyone's got a smartphone, there's social media, and just, being able to sell anything on Amazon and reach a global audience is just awesome.
Yeah, and you can micro-segment that audience. I mean, that's the piece about it. So people look at it and they go, well, everybody's connected. Everybody can do it. How do I get through? And you and I have talked before about how there's a pyramid effect. Hop in. If you're good, then the people that you impress, especially the ones that you didn't know at first, they'll connect you to other people who will connect you to other people. The big thing I've learned on this, they had a line in there about discipline. It's discipline plus consistency. In fact, I was reading another headline this morning talking about some of the folks that we regard as legends. The biggest thing they did was they just kept going. They persevered. They kept going. On that note, I started following this guy named Paul Singh. Paul did something very similar to what I did once upon a time. He got in his Airstream. I think it's with his girlfriend. I have not really stalked his personal life, but he was a VC and he traveled around the country. He said, you know what? I got an idea. I'm going to go travel around the country in my Airstream. So not really different than what we did in terms of travel the country in our RV. I learned about him because actually he's going to be the other headliner at this event, this innovation and event here in South Carolina. And so I was like, well, let me start following him and learn a little bit more about him. I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying his perspective on a lot of stuff. This one spoke out to me. Get to $1,000 first. You and I have talked about this. What is a VC going to look for? And I'm going to even go and say, what are you going to look for? If you're running a company, what are you going to look for? It is no question nerve-wracking when you've got an idea and you finally say, okay, it's time to go sell it. And you're talking to that first person, and in your head, I don't care if you've rehearsed it 1,000 times, whatever you're going to ask for, whether it's $500 or $50,000 or $1 million. And I'm not talking VC. I'm talking you're selling a product. You're selling your service, your solution, or whatever. You're still hesitant on it, and you're still trying to figure out how does that work. There's no substitute for doing it. And so he says that, and he says, look, I don't care what you want to get to. What I want to know is, can you get to 1,000 a month consistently? Yeah. How quickly can you get to 1,000 a month? I love it because it's not a high bar, but I'll tell you what, once I read this, I looked at some of the stuff I'm planning for 2017. And on one of the things I went, oh, that's interesting. How quickly can I get to that? Okay. All right. I like it. And then what happens is your brain starts thinking about that and you say, well, that's only like, maybe in some cases it's 10 sales. It might be 100. It might be 4. And so then you get to look at it and say, okay, well, what would it take to call 4 people? What would it
right.
take? And once you start down that path, oh man.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, that's pretty much exactly where we're at with my startup, right? So this is extremely, we already started thinking about this, but putting it in a little more detail in those terms is perfect advice for myself and John. It's great.
There's one other piece on this that I also really liked, which was so this is a quote from him. One of my biggest regrets around the tech tour is that it isn't about tech at all. It's about entrepreneurship. Yep. That's one of the things that's always drawn me. I love security, but I love what you and I are doing more because I don't care what your business is. I'd love to learn about it. Right. I am fascinated about it. And then we'll draw a parallel. There's always something we can learn in security. There's always some way we can help you. And that's why I think we've got some real opportunities. But that was a lot of fun. So, and then, of course, we can contrast that with, so know these numbers for your VC meeting. So this is more of the traditional thing. And I'm starting to look for more voices in that community that I like. But I thought this was interesting. The guy said, look, we turn down 99% of the companies that we get introduced to. Like you're not even going to get to a face-to-face meeting. But if you do, here's the numbers you need to know. Now, I want to point something out. If you're in that stage or you're thinking that you're going to do a startup where at some point you're going to seek some sort of capital, institutional or otherwise, I think these are great numbers to know. But I always love looking at these exact same things, right? Because in my case, I'm not looking for funding. I'm not looking for money. And people always say to me, well, Michael, would you take it? I don't know. What's the situation? I mean, It's not rare that somebody comes to you and says, hey, I love everything you're doing. Let me throw a big pile of cash at you. That's not typical. If it happened, I'd be happy to evaluate it. And so to that end, one of the things I've looked at with startups is start up like you might, because you never have to. Right. But at least you've got it. So you may also be looking at this and say, I am never going public. I am never going to ask a dime from anybody. We're going to bootstrap this puppy, lifestyle or otherwise. It's going to work. Yeah, cool. There are still things in here that make sense because what's cool is the VCs are very disciplined at looking at and selecting companies that they think are going to be successful. If you can do these things, I think you put yourself on the right stuff. The stuff here that I thought was pretty interesting and pretty straightforward, right? How many customers do you have? What's your top line revenue? But the lifetime value, I think that is so overlooked. I've come across it a lot in the years in security, and most people kind of go, I'm not sure. It's an area we got to take a look at. What is the lifetime value of a customer? And look, there's a lot of stuff on how to measure it. But if you haven't thought about that, you need to think about that. You need to think about the cost of goods sold. So what is your margin on that? Why is that your margin? Is there hidden stuff? I've made this mistake for years. Oh, that's like a 2-hour project. No, it's not. It's a 5-hour project. Oh, plus the cost of selling it. Oh, and then the fall. Okay, so it's a 10-hour project. Yep. Well, shit, I priced it as a 2-hour project. That's not going to work. growth is interesting. And, you and I talk about this. It won't be a show if we don't bring in Shark Tank. Mark Cuban is always the guy asking this question when they say, well, we've done $400,000 of revenue. Cool. What have you done in the last 12 months? He always wants to know what your run rate's been.
Right.
This one says last 6 months, I think it's good. Burning cash on hand. I think those are things that a lot of people don't know. And I think that those are essentials. How much cash are you burning through? And then I kind of like to know why. But I'm smaller, it might be easier for me. And then, so what's your cash on hand? And then from those two, it's kind of like, I call it runway. What's your runway? How far can you go? I actually find the shorter my runway, the longer the higher my stress, the longer my stress.
Yeah.
And so those are interesting to me as well to kind of figure that type of stuff out.
No, those are all good. Yeah, you got to know that stuff. I think, and like you said, like whether you're going for funding or not, those are good things to know as just general good business advice.
Now, let me do a twist on that. Same exact things. I think this is just as important. Even the last advice, $1,000 a month. You're running a company. So one of the things I've started looking at is that innovation in enterprises is not vastly different than startups. There's a different set of constraints, and there's perhaps a different set of thinking incorporated into it. But one of the things we're going to keep looking at this year is traction. How, as a startup, how do you get traction? If you're in the enterprise, how do you help a startup get traction because you like what they're doing and you want to benefit them? I would ask you the exact same questions. If you're running your security team today, or you're part of your security team today, what's your engagement like? How are you measuring that? Who are your customers? How are you serving your customers? What's that going like? How are you doing on your budget? How are you doing on those requests? Are you creating services? We know one of the things I've started offering to people from a security perspective, with some of the folks in the programs we're working on, they'll say, well, I don't have enough resources to do X, Y, and Z, so I've got to lengthen it out. And one of the things I've started to propose to people is, if you get your process down, could you have a third party step in and pick it up when they need to? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, cool. What would that cost? Oh, I don't know. We'll figure it out. I said, what you can always offer to your internal clients is, if it's an important enough project that needs to move fast enough, you can give them another option. It has a price tag attached to it, but you can help them. I said, and you can just pass the costs on, or you can make a little extra for yourself and use that to fund the development of new programs. And a lot of security people stop. Like it's almost like, are you still there? Did you hang up? Because all of a sudden they're like, I never thought about it that way. Guys, we can run our security teams like startups. We can follow Justin's advice and figure out what drives us and what's important to us. We can align that with the organization, and then we can go create services that people need to consume. And if we do it smartly, and we do it consistently, and we do it well, we can push a lot of security out to other people that they're willing to take on and own, frees us up to go focus on some other stuff. So when we talk about this, you can use this even if you're not today, oh yeah, I'm totally doing a startup. You're in a company, you can use this.
But what you just said, referring to Justin's interview about branding, understanding your mission, your ideals, and all that stuff that Justin talked about, segues nicely into the next story about how to start a company with no free time. Because the first thing, as you highlighted, Michael, is something we've talked about, both just you and I talking and on this show, right? I don't necessarily like the title because I think coffee is super important. It says just say no to grabbing coffee. I'm like, whoa, wait, no, we can't survive without coffee. But you have to, when you meet with people, be strategic about it. And understanding all the things Justin said, and a large what Michael was just talking about too, is understanding what your mission is and focusing on growing your business and not just meeting with everyone. And that's important advice.
Yeah, look, I people ask me, everybody was like, how you doing? How's your week going? And I'm pretty candid with people. I always find it fascinating when somebody says, well, let me be honest, or, now that TBH, right, to be honest. Well, I always expect honesty. Look, I'm a straight talker, and I expect straight talk in return. So when people ask me, I'm like, look, I'm kind of struggling to get going this year. I've got some pretty aggressive goals, and I plan to fully hit them. I came back from vacation exhausted and sick, and that wasn't good. And you know what? There's a lot there to talk about, and none of it relevant to the situation at hand. But I also started looking at where in the last 2 weeks I spent my time. You know what? I had a lot of people that suddenly wanted to catch up with me, and I granted a lot more of those calls than I should have. Now, it doesn't mean, if you're listening, that I didn't enjoy my call with you or that I didn't want to be part of it. What it means is I needed to be a little bit more ruthless about protecting my time. The other two that stuck out to me on this one is asking for actionable help. This is one of the things that I'm still kind of like, this is awesome, because what I've learned, and I learned this writing the book, and I've learned this in other things, if somebody says, how can I help? If you don't have a very specific, that's also something that they're capable of, just say, I'm good, thanks. Because I know people are well-intentioned when they want to help, but they don't know what that means. And a lot of times they either aren't able to help you or they're not willing to help you, even though they said they were. And a lot of times, if we, it's like, let me give you a very clean example. I see this a lot. So I'll go to a school and I'll say, okay, what are you guys doing around cybersecurity education or something to that effect? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I said, okay, well, have you asked anybody to help you? Yes. What did you say? We said, can you help us? So who did you ask? Well, we went to the local makerspace, or we went to local whatever. I said, okay. And basically you met with them, yes. And you said, can you help us? They said, yes. And what did they say? They said, yes. I said, well, just so we're clear, I have no clue what you need, what they can offer, or how that works. And I went, oh, that's interesting. By the way, I then go to the group and I go, have you guys ever reached out to a school? They go, absolutely. I said, okay, how'd it go? Well, I told them I'm willing to help. Great. What did they say? They said, great. So, okay, did you offer anything specific? Did you ask them what they need? Do they know what they need? And he goes, oh, I don't know. I love that people want to help. If you are in that position where you're going to help somebody, offer something specific that you can do. Do you need help getting traction? Do you need help making an introduction? Is there something I can do to help you? But then say specifically, with my skill set, my background, is there something that I can do to help you? And then remember, help could be like a 5-minute thing, or it can be a 2-hour thing. Ask them what they're willing to do. Just, so it's, this one is good. Like when you just say, hey, take a look at this. I don't know what that means.
It's interesting, Michael. This is a life skill that me personally, I learned in business first and then started applying to my life. And this is, it can go into many different facets, right? One big one is, I think in general, in fact, one of my neighbors just posted on Facebook about moms getting help, soliciting for help, and how they're usually not too good at that, right? Because no one can do it as good as mom can do it, right? And I think what I learned in business is exactly what you were talking about. Is you have to enable people to help you, and that may mean you have to spend some time thinking about, well, how could someone help me, and what do I need to do to enable people to help me? And then once I do that, am I going to get a good return on investment? It's not 100% of the time. Sometimes you're going to spend more time trying to enable people to help you than you could just go do it yourself. But you can't always do that because you get into the debt that we talk about, right?
Yeah, and that's it's an interesting trade-off thing, looking at a family dynamic, because that's one of the things that we look at as a family is, where's the line between it needs to get done, just get it done, and okay, let's go coach and help and train and up level so that they're capable of doing it.
Correct.
Recognizing that that's going to take twice as long and be really painful to watch for the next 12 weeks. In fact, there's new research on habit forming. So for a long time we said it takes 21 days to form a habit, good or bad. Yeah, so it's more like 50 to 60, and the average is now 66 days.
Yeah, I'm finding for some of my core business processes, it's like 6 to 8 months before I've built a team and got the process down to where I want it, where it can run at my standard levels, of operating. And that's for major business process things, right? Other things, you're right. I think, 30, 60 days is, but that's a time you have to make sure you're getting a return on that, right? And I think that's part of just trial and error, and just being smart about business and being smart about life too, right? And how you communicate that to your team members, whether it's your wife or whether it's the people that work with you or for you, as you've pretty much made a career out of, Michael. How you communicate it, I think, is one of the most important things.
Yeah, and it's we could do a whole show on how overlooked it is. And one of the things I spend a lot of time looking at right now is, how come if we know there's a way to do something, do we still sometimes not do it? And I've got some stuff that I think is going to make a difference there. The last piece of this that really spoke out to me was force yourself to do things imperfectly. That mattered to me so much. That was my big year, and I think I've shared this before, because people, oh, you're a perfectionist. No, that never resonated with me, and here's why. It wasn't perfection that I was searching for. It was two things. It was mastery and being prepared for whatever people could throw at me. So I kind of grew up in that attitude of, no one's going to be harder on me than me. And if you're going to come at me, I've already done it to myself. Just to be clear, that's horrible. And that's the worst possible thing in the world. And if you're in that situation now, knock it off. And if you need help, reach out to me, because it took a couple years, but I'm done with that. And what I realized was, good enough is good enough. In fact, sometimes your, I totally winged it, is somebody else's, that's amazing. How did you do that? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also a point of diminishing returns. And I'm getting to that point now. Look, there's some stuff on my website I'd love to update. Is it time to update it? No. Is using the time to update that better than doing something else? No. Okay, I'm good. Next.
Or identifying a couple things you can do and doing them on your website, good enough.
Yeah.
Right. There's what I find, and I think the resounding lesson here is most of the time in my experience, there's no substitute for just, getting it done. Right. And like, you need people like that in your life and on your team that can get things done. Right. Now, managing those people can sometimes be a little difficult. However, in terms of success, you got to have people that get stuff done. You yourself have to go do stuff, right?
It's about execution. The thing I figured out is that once you have your focus, it's about execution. Mm-hmm. Lest this sound like a plug for the stuff I'm working on, one of the big changes in Q4 for me was a shift from individual work to teamwork. Now, the paradox in that is that the way that I help teams up-level their performance is by actually working with the individual in the context of the team. We do both at the same time. Oh man, is it working? I'm learning a lot in the process, but it's working. And so what I've learned is it boils down to this. Do you have clarity of focus? Do you have priority of action? And are you executing by taking the best next step? And are you doing that? The way I explain it bluntly is ruthlessly. You have got to be ruthless in your execution. You've got to crowd out the distract. Once you've picked it and you've picked your cycle, I don't care if it's a week or 12 weeks. I wouldn't go longer than that right now. Execute, put on the blinders, get everything else, get it done. A, you'll feel better when you get it done, and B, you won't. Picked up 2 books yesterday on discount on Amazon. One is Cal Newport's Deep Work. I cannot wait to get into that. By the way, I probably won't get into that till February or March. And then I picked up another one called the 12-week work year. I don't think it's a take on Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week stuff. What he talked about is most people look at the year, and so they get really stuck. I'm going to show you how to look in terms of 12-week cycles, which is essentially quarterly. It lines up to some stuff I naturally did for myself, so now I want to go look at that a little bit better. You can see the post that's behind me, and no, I did not use a ruler to line those up. That was me looking at some stuff.
Straight talk and straight Post-it notes.
I have an eye for straightness, apparently. But I'll tell you what, I also figured out. I've got something else. I don't know if it'll go there or someplace else on my wall. But I'm working on it right now, and it's relative to this stuff. I'm actually going to do the next 6 weeks, week by week. I know how many articles I need to write. I know how many. I'm going to start doing some live video in addition to what we do together to talk about straight talk with people. And then I've got some other goals in terms of stuff that I want to create, stuff that I want to roll out, and companies that I want to go work with. And that means then there's some sales processes I've got. So I'm going to just go map it out for like 6 weeks. And see if that gives me absolute clarity so that I can look at on my wall at the end of the week and go, did you do it? Yes or no? Oh, and here's the measures. Did you have these number of articles? Do you have these number of new clients? Do you have this amount of revenue, right? That 1,000 a month type of a concept. This, and this. Because what I've also learned is when you set this stuff and you're looking how to start up in no time or just manage your time better, there has to be a mechanism for measuring. The other thing I like using a lot lately is the Ivy Lee method, and that's you set up 6 things. So at the end of today, you say, okay, there's 6 things I want to get done tomorrow. Or if you really manage to take the whole weekend off, there's 6 things I want to get done on Monday. And here they are in priority order, and you tackle the first one first. And the second one, and if you get all 6 done, either good for you, you're done, or you can move on to the next one. But it's instead of trying to do too many. And I find, oddly enough, that's kind of working. And I use a visual Kanban board. And sometimes now I can kind of check my progress in a week by counting, how many did I get done? At the end of the week, I should have roughly 30 done.
I know we're short on time, but I want to continue on this because I think it's important, especially for startups, right? And one of the things that I learned from experience in building businesses, but more importantly from Michael and doing this show and talking to all of our guests, right? I kind of came to the conclusion that it was important to do 3 things, which kind of leads me to the do things even if they're imperfect, right? If you define or build or cultivate your culture, right? That's the first thing, right? Because culture is separate from these other 2 items. Define your mission, which is separate from your culture, right? Your mission happens, I think, inside of your culture, and then define goals. And I'm like, wow, those are 3 totally different things. So let's define those. Okay, now we got a base to run with, and then, John Strand is a shining example of someone who gets things done, right? But
Yeah.
if you've communicated that culture, that mission, and those goals, sure, they're getting things done. They might be imperfect and not exactly the way you want them. However, if you're doing it, getting it done, you can say, okay, well, the next time we do this, right, align it with those other three things, and maybe do it a little differently, and learn from doing them. That's basically how we're running this year, and it's really exciting.
You know what I love is that you're making the case for some of the stuff we're doing right now in Straight Talk. It's what I call the leadership roadmap. And then what I'm working with one of my clients on is how do we calibrate on a quarterly basis? How do we calibrate team level on a monthly basis? And what's our ad hoc ability so that if we start seeing that some of those goals may be in conflict, or we're confused about them, or something else pops up, instead of going, oh, now what do we do? Or you actually have an ordered process that we're trying to get down to like 15 minutes to just kind of go through it and go, okay, this is what we're reprioritizing, and we're all in agreement, and this is how it fits into the bigger picture. We're good, go. So you're not wasting time on it. You're not stuck. You're not running on ice, but that you're in sync. Because otherwise, friction creeps in, and you're gonna get crushed again.
See, I do listen, Michael.
I know, brother, and you're helping me out too. It's making sense. All right, listen, I know we're tight on time. Let me just preview, because one of them we weren't going to talk about anyway. There's an investment term sheet. Holy cow, it is chock full of ideas. So if this is something you're tracking with us, I'm actually going to print it out and go through it in a little bit more detail myself now that the holidays are over, and we might be able to start pulling this into some of our stories of the week and some of the things that we think are interesting. The story that we won't really have a lot of time on, but I think it's great, stories about stay-ups. So the idea here was, so everybody's a startup, everybody's looking for the unicorn, and this is the line that totally pulled me in. Surviving on someone else's dime isn't news. Oh. Now, look, I'm all for institutional and other investment. I love it. I have no problems with it. But I thought, it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of people out there that have been in the grind for some period of time, and they do it day in and day out. And I love the fact that they're looking at them. It gave me the idea that perhaps, Paul, that might be something at least periodically you and I take a look at. Companies that have withstood and they're doing well by doing good. So I thought those were interesting. On the security notes and news of interest, because we're tight on time, there wasn't a ton here. There's two that I'd rather focus on. BitGlass raised $45 million. This is Series C. Is that interesting to you?
Say that again?
BitGlass, $45 million. Those are Series C rounds, so it's their third round.
What does BitGlass do? I mean, that's a...
Yeah, see, it's funny. I knew the name, and I couldn't tell you what they did. BitGlass develops a cloud security software that offers encryption, data protection, and threat detection services. They're listed as a competitor of SkyHigh and Netscope, which actually makes a lot of sense to me. Here's what I thought was interesting. When I go to the Owler page, our secret, so their Series A was in 2013, $10 million. Their Series B was $25 million in 2014. Their Series C was 3 years later, January 2017. So it was actually yesterday it closed, $45 million for Series C. Where they rank relative to other people in terms of funding, like, so SkyHigh's raised $106 million, Netscope's raised $134 million. So, it's kind of like, I feel like a little bit like maybe they're catching up. I thought it was interesting. Just it's a huge number. It's a company. It's doing cloud. It's doing encryption. I don't put a lot of stock into predictions. I can give you this one. We're going to keep talking about encryption in 2017. So
yeah, I think it's interesting. It tells me that one or both of these conditions are true with these cloud security companies. One, it's really expensive to run them, and two, they're signing customers and growing their business. Right? It's probably a combination. If you look at the funding that all these companies have got, now that I know what space they play in, that's really interesting. I think that's personally, I think that's a huge growing market, and that's probably why the funding has been pretty liberal in those areas, because you've got thousands and thousands of companies, dude, that are just, they're going all in cloud. So
yeah, and I think too, investors understand it. So I do cloud and I do security. Oh, hold on. So you're taking two hot topics and you're pushing them together. I think that makes it a lot easier. I'll call it out just because I thought it was interesting. So Unsplash, are you familiar with Unsplash?
No.
Okay, so I discovered this a couple years ago. There's a whole backlash in the speaking and the marketing community against stock photography a couple years ago. And so a couple people sprung up and they said, you know what, we don't have stock photos, those gimmicky things. We've got real photos of real people, and we're going to build some communities around that. One of my favorites is Pixabay. Another one is Death to Stock Photo. They're great. I use them all the time. And there's another one called Unsplash. And I've been following them, and I think they do a really quality job. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been neat charting their growth. So they sent an email. This came in last night. I had already show prepped. They sent in an email, so I threw it in there. And they basically said, hey, we did this. We run a company called Crew, and we did this as a side project, and it took like an hour, every 10 days, and we didn't really care. And then it started growing. And then our company took on funding, and we've got like $5 million in the bank, and it turns out we can't run both companies with the same staff the same way. It's not fair to either company. So guess what? We're going to go ahead and split those companies off. What I loved about it, and this kind of goes back a little bit to Justin's talking about the authenticity of it, it was a good read. And there were a lot of lessons in there about, so what's it like to start something out of passion because it needed, because it was authentic, because it did help your brand. That's the fascinating part, was they said, look, Unsplash definitely helped our brand. This gave us more clients than we could have imagined. It was a fantastic way. So you and I talk about this a lot. It was, we gave back to the community, and that gave back to us in spades, and we were able to raise a lot of funding and do really cool stuff, and now we're at a point where it needs to run separate, and that's okay. We're going to do that. And there's still, you know what? We're still going to run them out of the same location, and we're still going to work together, because that was amazing too. There's so much in there that it's a good read. So
it's that honesty that Justin talked about. I like it.
There's a humble brag that drives me nuts. This wasn't a humble brag. This was here's a story, because holy cow, if you had asked me 3 years ago if this was going to happen, I would have laughed in your face. And here we are. There's another part to this too that I'd love to follow up with them on. Somehow they've managed to split the funding that they had into two separate accounts managed separately. That's nifty. I thought that was really kind of cool. In terms of me, things are awesome. I had a great year. I'm learning a lot. My language is getting better on it, and I am intensely focused for the next 6 weeks or so. We can talk more about that later, but I'm excited about it.
Awesome.
How about you, man? You good?
Yeah, everything's great. We're building out some of our cloud infrastructure and working on getting our interface, the second iteration of our interface going. So, things are exciting.
That's awesome.
And, I learned something about business process too. I'm going to relate it to like a software developer and how you don't mess with their tools. And I did a lot of evaluation the end of 2016 and early this year. And Michael, you and I have had a lot of discussions about what tools and platforms we use in support of our business. And I think every startup has to deal with this issue all the time. And sometimes, like, what you're using, if it's working, just, stick with it. And that's largely what we decided to do on a lot of different fronts. So
that's awesome.
Extend what you have is essentially what we're doing. So if it's not broke, don't try and fix it.
Yeah, as long as you're not running yourself down to a tunnel, right? If you're like, it's not broke, it's working. Where are we going? I have no idea. Yeah, okay. Then get yourself squared away. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching this edition or listening to this edition of Startup Security Weekly. See everyone next week.